success team are also on hand to help with the questions throughout the session, as is Analytics Product Manager, Brittany Hollingsworth, and Senior National Accounts Manager, Oliver Stevenson, is also here should there be any queries account related. Now, just to cover at the top of this call, this is not to be an end-to-end training session. There is training content available on the Bullhorn Learning Hub, and that goes into user setup and both basic and advanced report setup. The links to these should have been made available to you, and the email would have gone out ahead of time, but for anyone in need of them, or perhaps you've misplaced the email, if you reach out to your account manager, they will be able to provide you with these, but also links will be going into the chat. Purpose of this webinar is more to demonstrate the use cases of dashboards, like the variety and depth that it can cover, and also to discuss the best ways to get the most out of the module. Whilst I said this isn't end-to-end training, there will be a short section dedicated to spending some time on one of the more finer points on configuration of maybe the more intricate elements of the module. As I said, the final third of the call has been set aside to work as a Q&A session as well. So just as a quick overview for analytics, the whole purpose of the system is to enable businesses to utilize data to faster make decisions, for them to be able to look at numbers and have visibility on what works, what doesn't, where business is working efficiently, and maybe where areas of improvement are. It's meant to highlight these efficiencies or where they can be improved to create a higher return on effort. The purpose being to enable you to work smarter, but not necessarily harder, and to use those insights to help your business create better value for your clients. Something to be aware of with analytics is that the most common usage does tend to lean towards sales and recruiting to get the system to kind of better guide external facing activity. However, it is not exclusively the sole purpose of the system. As I'll get into shortly, there are extensive applications for the platform for operation staff as well. With the correct metrics and application, there is extensive opportunity for the likes of back office teams in finance and contracts compliance, as well as learning and development to help make great use of the system to guide and inform their work. Dashboards is designed to make all of this all the more efficient, more apparent, easier to digest, make sense of, and also action. So just to mention before we go on, Dashboards is a module that is only available on the Enterprise edition of Bullhorn Analytics. So if you have joined this webinar from a business without it, in order to make use of the module, you will need to have the Enterprise edition of the platform. As an overview on Dashboards, though, it is a new module that combines the existing reporting functionality of the OneView, OnPoint, and Trends modules, as well as new functionality that operates in a very similar way to Slice and Dice into one convenient location that I mentioned. There isn't any plan for Dashboards to retire any of the existing modules that I just mentioned, but to complement them with the convenience of having versions which, albeit perhaps are not as extensive as their dedicated module counterparts, in one place. Over the coming months, the functionality of it will be enhanced and expanded. For example, there are plans for the Trends tiles to have cumulative and period-on-period functionality implemented so that it closely resembles the capabilities of that actual Trends module. And client feedback is very important at this stage, as it is at any stage. But whether that be highlighting bugs or perhaps raising functionality feature requests for enhancing the abilities of the module, the aim is to have Dashboards both as extensive as would be needed, but also as user-friendly as possible. Whilst you can submit feedback and feature requests through the appropriate account and support channels, in the coming weeks, there will be an in-app survey made available so that you can give feedback more directly. Now onto actual Dashboards, now that I've done all of the backstories. As with existing modules on the system, Dashboards use is very subjective. Clients that I've spoken to have already started using it to complement their OneViews, for example, having Dashboards as a hub for their staff to look at, to find more detailed information without the need to craft slice and dice reports or to click into individual metrics on their OneView to find important data. Others I've spoken to have started to use Dashboards to retire old offline reporting, like their spreadsheets, thanks to the variety of display options that Dashboards uses. So using data from Bullhorn, having Dashboards display a combination of list views and graphs and ratios that wouldn't really be possible in any of the existing modules without swapping between them on a regular basis. There is one client that has decided to craft a dashboard that will replace their end of week presentations. So where they'd previously had them on a PowerPoint, they've made one long single document that can be scrolled through to summarize the week's data, knowing that it will be up to date as of the minute of screen share. One thing I found to be greatly beneficial is to have an idea as to what you want a dashboard to be about. So trying to have a single dashboard cover every possible subject causes them to become extremely busy and at times very difficult to make sense of. So keeping them broad and simple while also having relevant detail as apparent as possible is probably the best way to go. So as I just mentioned, having an idea as to what you want a dashboard to cover ahead of its creation is key, not just in terms of trying to construct it, but also for the desired audience to find it coherent. So to this end, there are two main types of reports that I'd advise for dashboards. The first is more persona-based, centered around certain users that maybe can have a wider scope in terms of the information it's displaying, but is very much orientated to a personal specific set of people. So for example, with dashboards, you have a manager dashboard by default. This, much like the toolkit reports in Slice and Dice, is meant as a jumping off point, sort of a partially filled out canvas from which to build upon, kind of like a paint by numbers where we've given you the outline and it's on you to fill in the blanks. The aim of a manager dashboard, though, would be to look at the activity and the overall progress of, say, a team, track how it's faring over time. Is productivity and activity increasing or on the decline? Are there certain staff that maybe need closer attention paid to them? Other examples of persona-based reports would be delivery consultants or recruiters, depending on which country you're in, focusing more on candidate-based metrics, whereas, say, a counterpart report on the sales or business delivery side would be more focused on client-based metrics. Combining elements of those two, you could obviously then create a dashboard for 360 or full desk staff that would be a little more overarching. Now, as I mentioned before, there is also the opportunity for operations staff to be using the system. So for learning development, for example, a lot of what they will look at will effectively mirror what the rest of your staff are looking at. And through the use of tags, which is a function that allows you to report on users cross-functionally, you can cherry pick which staff you're collectively reporting on without the need to rearrange the team structure on the system. Lastly, for the likes of back office staff in finance, contracts, compliance, where the focus will be more on placements, extensions, terminations, onboarding, with the right use of metrics. And I tend not to really try and emphasize this, but with, say, certain custom metrics that would work on the intricacies of your specific business processes, having that centralized visibility that dashboards can afford staff in those roles has been proven to be really helpful. The other type of reports that we can build, though, are more report-based. So where persona-based was for certain users with a bit of variety in data, report-based is more for certain data with maybe a bit of variety in the users. So examples of those would be to track activity and efficiencies, so how hard the business is working against how smartly it's working, drilling down into placements and revenue and the likes of average margins and times to fill, using the client filtering option, which we'll also cover when we go through examples. You can create a report that combines elements of all of the above, but all of the data is then filtered to a specific client or set of clients. By the same token, I've worked with clients in the past for creating key accounts dashboards, so to speak, that would be set up with information that would be appropriate for them to screen share when speaking to their clients. So they'll jump on a call with their client and say, right, okay, I want to have a look at how my business is performing your business, and they'll run through metric by metric with the graphs and the visualizations to say, this is how we're performing. You can also use report-based dashboards to focus on things like your contract book of business, if you're a company that operates in that market, looking at the likes of weekly GP, tracking contractor numbers, average margins, and so on. But we'll go through an example of that as well. As mentioned before, a report based purely on the compliance team's onboarding schedule is a possibility, and also so is one that tracks ROI, where you'd be able to use dashboards to track and filter the successes that you're having with the likes of job boards, or in the example that we'll look through shortly, Sourcebreaker. Now, I've made you look at my frankly beautifully crafted slides of text for long enough without actually showing you the system, so we'll jump into a couple of reports. But one disclaimer I would like to put forward is that all of the data in this environment is our test environment. So if you do see numbers and names that maybe look a little bit abstract, I would appreciate your understanding. So the first report I wanted to look through was a recruiter dashboard. So With this, they are all set up to scroll vertically. So it is effectively like reading through a page. And there are a couple of things at play. So the first I wanted to mention was specifically around that layout that I mentioned in terms of you want to be planning ahead. So in this example, things have been broken down kind of in order of priority. So especially for a recruiter, their bread and butter is usually going to be, what activities have I had? With dashboards, you can also, within tiles, where every sort of metric involved is set up in a tile format, you can have these work in a variety of different timeframes, different client sets, things like that. So in this example here, I've looked at, for a recruiter, CV sent or client submissions, first interviews, further interviews, offers, placements. I've got them along the top as this month, because obviously that is usually the priority. But then for further context, having the same metrics duplicated to cover this year. With these are all metric tiles, so they are relatively easy to set up. And yes, whilst I won't go into the in-depth creation of every kind of tile type, if you were to confer to the training materials, it's one of the first things that we cover. So moving further down in this example report, we've moved on to live and current. So whilst these are more scorecard reporting to say within the time frame selected for this month, last month, this year, whatever it is, live metrics are always relevant to today's information. So regardless of what other time frame you've set for the rest of the report, these are always centered on today. So we've got interviews pending as a metric tile, and beside that, we have a small data tile. They're the ones that more closely resemble slice and dice. There are a few ways that you can use them, which we will cover. The example here is more as a static list view. So when you are setting these up, you're able to sort the columns. So in here, we have it sorted by interview date. Some of these, obviously a little bit more pressing, with some of them taking place today. Again, the data may be kind of showing me up slightly. Laurier is scheduled to interview in a few years' time. But beside that, we also have a graphical representation of those pending interviews. Where are they taking place? So if, for example, a recruiter is supposed to be maybe focusing on specific clients, are they taking the lion's share of that graph? Further down, in very similar fashion, we have it on pending starters, so a metric here to show you the total, then a list of the candidates in question, a graph to show week by week how many are scheduled to be happening. Below that, we have their current contractors in order of their end date, the idea being that they would then have a bit of a focus, say, right, okay, with these candidates, should I be speaking to them about extensions? Should I be getting on to maybe the account manager about our extensions coming? And beside those, there are the trend tiles, just as a quick kind of showcase of how they work. So with this one, using the contractors out in period metric, you're able to have it forecast in the future, such as below here, where this is looking to say over the course of the year, this is what is scheduled to happen to your contractor numbers, as opposed to at the top, which says year to date, this is how they have gone. Below that, you have the likes of jobs, and this showcases the other one of the other uses for the small data tiles. So whilst up here, this is a static list, below you're also able to sort them into drop downs of sorts. So this jobs list is based on their priority. So you have hot, warm, and cold. You can see there are 206, 27, and 3. If I was to then click into it, it would then expand to say, okay, we have 2 cold jobs here, 1 cold job here. If I was to then click into it again, it would say what the job titles are, and they are sorted by the number of days that this job has been live on the system. Again, something to kind of push to say, okay, with these jobs, see, hot priority is usually top of the agenda. Where are they at? How many days have they been open? Should we be working them? Should we be closing them down? Below that, we've covered opportunities, but one thing I wanted to dwell on slightly more is this actionable insight section. So whilst metrics predominantly will look at actions that have happened, actionable insights are more designed to show you things that haven't happened. So for example, there are 20 pending starters where there have been no call within the last 30 days, or there have been 14 jobs added in the last week where there hasn't been any activity for them whatsoever. The idea being to then prompt the person looking at this report to go, okay, these are the things that I saw well and good that I've seen above. This is the state of play, but these are things that now I need to go and do. Below them, we also have ratios. So there are ratio tiles that work and look very similar to the metric ones. This is using the new ratio comparison functionality. So with these, you can work stage to stage and effectively stack on top of each other. So shortlist to send, CV sent to first to offer. Or you can have them work slightly differently to all work to a fixed point. So this is where you'd more likely be able to see specific drop off in terms of when you get to the end result and success, where is it that's letting you down? One thing to mention, you may notice that this says 200%, which is a good call out to make in terms of data integrity. So if you do have a ratio that is showing you something like that, it will highlight that there is potentially a data integrity issue or that a step has been missed in the process. So given that 46% CV to placement, 78% first to placement, this would suggest that people aren't logging their offers. So moving on to the next report that I wanted to go through is more the operations dashboard. So with dashboards in general, by the way, you can set within the user settings which module it is that opens upon start of analytics. So if you're opening it through Bullhorn and the analytics tab appears, you can set it that dashboards is the first page that arrives. Within open, you'll see that there are these home icons and they set what it is that opens when dashboards opens. So I click into it again, the recruiter dashboard opens again. So if you were looking to have certain users within the business say, right, when you open analytics, this is where you are going to, it is easy enough to set that up. Now, in terms of the operations dashboard, things do work slightly differently when you're looking at operations compared to, say, sales or recruiting staff, in that CV sends, first interviews are perhaps not as important. And this is more focused around things like placements and starters. Idea being, obviously, if you have a placement, contracts compliance need to be getting things in order. When you have starters, the finance teams need to be making sure that they're getting invoicing out. And that's demonstrated here through certain metric tiles and also trend graphs. Below them also covers another function that is admittedly exclusive to the enterprise function, like the addition, in that you have the opportunity to implant actuals. So especially from the contract placement perspective, where analytics will work off of pay rate, bill rate, potentially burden, to work off start date and an end date, the way that the metrics will work is to assume that everyone is going to work every possible day within that time frame. Now, anyone who's worked in contract recruitment before will appreciate that not every contractor work every single day that they are scheduled to. So there will be not discrepancies per se, but with the standard metrics, they work more as a forecast, whereas actuals, you're able to input, this is the actual amounts that we have been invoicing. So here you have it in table form using small data, also using small data again in the graph format to say month by month, this is the amount that we should be invoicing. Below that, we have metrics using the new businesses placed with. These are designed to count every time you place with a business where there has been no other placement logged against them on Bullhorn ever. So idea behind that being, these are businesses that you need to be making sure that terms of business are actually agreed with, as opposed to just sending invoices out. Below that, again, another key element in terms of layout is I've broken it down by permanent or direct hire and below that contract, just to make life a little bit easier due to the fact that obviously permanent direct hire is going to be a one-off invoice. Contract is more payroll and professional indemnity insurances and all of those super fun things. So here, again, we have a static list view of these are the starters from the last 30 days. We should be getting invoices out. Here are the pending starters. We should be making sure that everything is in order. And again, replicating above in terms of invoicing. Below them, as I mentioned, you have the contract side. So contract starters in the last 30 days, has everything been set up? Are they all good to go still? Pending starters, again, similar situation, has all of their onboarding been completed? And once again, with the invoicing. Below them, similar to what we looked at with the recruiter dashboard, is more focused on total contractor numbers to say this is where the state of the contractor book is going. Also starting to maybe highlight more in-depth things such as the current weekly GP as a total, what the current full value of a placement would be, the number of redeployments, and also to summarize using those drop-down small data views to say which clients have we got contractors with, what is the weekly GP that in theory we should be invoicing with them, and then to expand them out to say breakdown by client. Here are our contractors, here are our charge rates and our pay rates, how frequently they're being paid, client contact, and also their contact details, just in case obviously contracts compliance or something that needs to reach out. Then also have upcoming finishes, perhaps maybe to nudge the sales and recruiting teams to say, are there going to be extensions coming? We're getting close to the deadline. And then having ratio tiles. As I mentioned, this is the first one that we can see. Set up a ratio to track in the next 6 weeks, what percentage of our weekly GP is scheduled to finish. Obviously, I appreciate, having worked in operations before, sometimes you do get those kind of questions from the powers that be as to where things are going to be going. In terms of more report-based dashboards, this is where obviously before we're looking at recruiters, they're going to maybe cover a few things. You're looking at operations. Yes, they'll also be looking at more placements, but it would be split across contract or perm. Whereas contracts dashboard is more focused to purely look only at the contract book of business. So having trend graphs again to show the state of play, ratio tiles again to say what percentage of our contractors is due to finish, more focus on things like the average duration of our contracts, the average margins, the average weekly GPs, the amount of revenue written this month and this year. With these as well, it affords us the opportunity to get a little more in depth, where perhaps you wouldn't really want to bog down a report with, say, a recruiter dashboard to go into. Here is a breakdown of all of your clients that you have runners with at the minute and all of the weekly GP that you can probably afford within a contracts dashboard. So here you can see that this client, where the lion's share of our contractors are, as opposed to this one across here, looking at weekly GP, where that dominance isn't quite as prevalent. Below them as well, also, we have our first example of the performance snapshot tiles. So these are the ones that more closely resemble the existing on point. So in this example, we've got it set up to look at, with our contractors, what teams, what consultants are in ownership of how many contractors. And then below there, similar to what we've seen before, you have a current contractor list in order of weekly GP set up statically. And then 2 below, looking at the next 6 weeks finishes and the pending starters, again, in order of the relevant dates. Below them, we have something that's maybe a little bit more in terms of insights. So on the left, we have average fee broken down by clients that we currently have contractors out with. The idea being that the further left you are in this graph example, these clients are providing us a higher margin as opposed to these down here. So especially from the contracts dashboard perspective, where it's meant to inform of how you are doing, perhaps using the account management and sales guys steering more business development efforts in terms of getting jobs at these clients as opposed to these. And a similar situation to the graph beside it with the average placement working days. So these clients here are giving us our longer contracts as opposed to these guys here. So that was in terms of contracts. One of the other ones wanted to go through was around ROI. So hopefully, thanks to them being within the Bullhorn family, Sourcebreaker are afforded maybe more in-depth metrics. And the principles of it would still remain the same, in that through sort of clever configuration, you can still have it look at every job board you have and things like that. But in this example, where it's meant to demonstrate ROI, we have metrics showing this is the number of new candidates that we've had from Sourcebreaker this year. This is the number of candidates that we've sent out, the number of placements, the revenue, things like that, to be able to kind of highlight and say, right, okay, are these numbers where we want them to be? Are they higher than we expected, which is great? Are they maybe lower? Should we be maybe retraining the guys, or maybe having a bit of a push to say we should be using these more? Trend graphs to illustrate those points. So see the blue line here, which is you can click in and out, is demonstrating the new candidates from Sourcebreaker to say, right, okay, are they on the up? Are they on the decline? Should we be pushing? Similar to what we mentioned before. But where ROI reporting will kind of come into its own somewhat is through these small data graphs. So on the left here, I have new candidates from Sourcebreaker broken down by their further source. So which job boards through Sourcebreaker are you getting the most traction with? So Monster is obviously dominating here. Then beside it, looking at new candidate sources from every source listed. So regardless if it's SourceBreaker or not, there again, you can see SourceBreaker Monster is still showing that it is getting that kind of dominant position in this is where we get our candidates, followed by LinkedIn. So again, to demonstrate ROI, yes, we are getting most of our candidates statistically from SourceBreaker. Below them, again, starting to use those graphs to break things a little bit further down with candidates that you've sent, that you've sourced from SourceBreaker. Which ones are you getting most traction with in terms of they are eligible to go to jobs? So whilst Monster is probably the main source in terms of when they go out, it's actually total jobs where they seem more eligible for roles. Beside that, we have it based on the jobs that they are being sent to. So in terms of that ROI factor, what jobs are we sourcing candidates using these sources where we're sending them out? So marketing manager, sales representative, and software engineer are obviously getting candidates that are more relevant than, say, a senior legal counsel. Below them, similar principles, again, with placements. So whilst Monster, you're maybe not sending as many candidates as you are with total jobs, they do account for 50% of placements. Below them, using it again in an ROI fashion to see who is getting the most traction, because obviously not every person within the business would use platforms in the same way. Saying between CV sends, the contract guys are sending more than the permanent and the direct hire guys, as opposed to placements where it does seem that only the contract guys are getting placements with the SourceBreaker side of things. Again, to highlight things to say, maybe we have a look at how the permanent guys are using SourceBreaker in this example. Below them, we're using ratios again, this time comparing them to just the broader numbers. So in these examples this year, percentage of candidates coming from SourceBreaker is 9%, whereas in the last 90 days, that's 26%. So it's shot up. Inversely, with CVs being sent, year to date, it's 2%, but in the last 90 days, it's 1%. So it's actually dipped. Again, something to be able to have visibility on, to say, okay, there are perhaps steps that we need to take to make sure that we are getting the most out of things. The last dashboard I wanted to show, again, is a report-based one, and this is on key accounts. So using the drop-down at the top, you are able to filter all of the results below by a specific client or set of clients if you wanted to start adding things in. Also, if you have been using client sets within OneView or, say, Slice and Dice, you can also bring those in here. So with these, similar situation in terms of layout, in that you do want to consider how things look, because especially with this one, there is a lot on the go. So where I mentioned about potentially having one that you would want to find appropriate to share screen with when speaking to your clients, having something as extensive as this, they might look at and go, there's way too much on the go here. I'm not even really going to bother. So making sure that things are apparent. And in terms of layout, with these tiles, you are able to resize them to be larger, smaller. You can position them around how you want them to move and all things like that, in order to try and make these dashboards a little easier to assimilate, so to speak. So with these, again, all of the information is relevant to that one client. So metric tiles, how many contractors we have out with them at the minute, how many calls have we made to them this month, how many jobs have we added. Using then more small data to say, okay, with these jobs, what has been the activity with them in the time frame that we're looking at? Similarly to what we've looked at previously, breakdown in terms of contracts. How many contractors do we have out with them? What percentage is scheduled to finish? What's our average weekly GP? And the like. You've got jobs where you're starting to integrate maybe a few things like the actual insights to say, right, we have 115 live jobs with this client right now. 91 of them have been open more than 100 days. Now, that's not to say that jobs shouldn't be open more than 100 days, but it does put an element of emphasis on them to say, it's been more than 3 months. How are we doing with them? Have we really serviced them as well as we should? Below that, you start to get into more CV sends. And again, using those graphs to highlight, okay, with this client, this is where our CV sends have been going more to in terms of roles. Same with interviews again, and using graphs to say, okay, interviews per offer. How many interviews are we needing to get an offer with this client? Is that on the decline? Is that on the increase? And the thing to be aware of, especially with trend graphs using ratios, is that especially if you have, say, first interviews to offers, you really want that number to be as low as possible, because you obviously want less interviews to get an offer. Then you break down into placements. And this again highlights things in that this section looks very busy. And whilst it is very informative to go into, this is the total number of placements that we've made this month and this year, and then split that out between perm and contract at a glance, they are very full on, as in you need to think about them a little bit before you could just look and go, right, okay, great, I know what's going on. Below them, a little bit more of a focus on those ratios, and then the pending starters, as was shown below. So the idea of sort of going through these is more to highlight the use cases, to give a level of inspiration. That's not to turn around and say, our word is gospel and everyone should have reports that look identical to these, but to just help inspire without the risk of sounding cheesy. One thing that I did want to go through beyond this is something that has come up quite a lot since dashboards has been rolled out, and that is the creation of the small data tiles. So these are the most diverse in terms of functionality, and as we kind of went through, you can see graphs, you can see static list views, you can see drop downs. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes going through how those work. So when you are setting up a dashboard, you have the edit toggle in the top right hand side. If they are off, it is effectively locked. You can't click into anything. When it's in edit, you get all of the options to go through and start to manipulate those tiles. So you have drop downs at the top, which dictate which users the information is going to be around. You have the time frames around what you want this data to be sort of set in terms of the timescale. You have those client filters to filter everything out by specific clients. Below those, you have the tags. So where we mentioned with the learning development guys, if you want to say, right, okay, I want to be looking at all of the activity for the experienced hires or the guys on probation, this is where you would select those. But to add the tiles, click Add Panel in the top right-hand corner, and you will have this box appear where it lists the different tile types with a little description as to what they are. So in this example, we're going to go through small data. And we will look at, let's go for CV send, although they would also be client submissions if you're in another country. The way that they will default is to sort by owner and to show a total value. So one thing that also semi-regularly comes up in customer success calls is what KPI value means. KPI value is dictated by whatever metrics that you are looking at. So if you were looking at total placements, it's showing you the number of deals. If you were looking at sales, it's showing you the monetary value of those. So it's very subjective. Obviously with CV sends, the KPI value is going to be showing you how many CVs you have sent. So with small data, especially within pivot mode, which I'll go into shortly, they are dictated by what is in row groups, values, and column labels. So these effectively, when you're building graphs, work as the axes. So at the moment, if I was to click into the table icon in the top left-hand corner, it will default to a bar chart. I can select, say, a pie chart. It will say, okay, we're looking at CV sends. We're looking at the number of CVs that they have done, and we're breaking it down by person. So if I was to then change that to remove owner, it would show you just the overall total. So using this list here, so these lists are what you would see when you click into, say, a slice and dice report. They are the little widgets that you can drag around. Or if you were to click into a metric on the one view, they are the columns that you see when you get the expanded views. These can be added and removed in the admin menu within the metrics sub menu, but that's also covered in the training materials. So I'll try not to waste your time doing so now. But if I was to then drag company into row groups, it's then showing, instead of users, this is the number of CVs that we have sent per client. If I then go into that's an extremely busy pie chart, it's then broken down by who these clients are. So if I was to then look at these, again, maybe not a manageable pool of information. But one thing to be aware of is that the chart will sort in the same order as the table. So where at the moment this is in a relatively random view, I can then sort to go alphabetically or by highest total. If I was to then click back into the table, it then follows suit. One of the other means of using the small data tiles is in terms of those lists. So I'm going to duplicate this to create a carbon copy so that all of the information is the same. And this is especially helpful if you're looking to have metrics do very similar things. Maybe you want to tweak the timeframes on them, for example. And what we want to do is make use of those row groups. So where at the moment, it's just showing totals for company, if you then scroll through and add in job title underneath or accidentally above, it will then break them down by that drop down. So if I look within this client, I select, it then expands out to say, okay, we've had 173 in total, 39 of them are for Java developer roles, 10 are for financial analysts. You get the gist. With these, you can then start breaking them down even further, depending on how deep you want to go. So if we then start clicking back into with this client, let's look at the job priorities, and then we look at the jobs. The final way I wanted to discuss is more that static list view that we were seeing before. And the way to accomplish this is to turn pivot mode off. So with it, it will still try and sort things based off these row groups and these values. So in order to accomplish these static list views, you need to remove the row groups and probably the values. Then the contents are governed by this list instead. So this is where you start to click things in and out. So if you wanted to take job priority out and go, right, we want to look at the candidates, or we want to look at the client contacts, or we want to look at the job owners, or whatever it is, this is where you click them in and out. You can also reposition the columns by either dragging and dropping them there, or by doing the same there. Now, I appreciate that this has been a lot to try and take in, but obviously the hope is that these will, again, try and inform and inspire, so to speak, rather than try and be a bit of a commandment to say, this is what you should be doing. Now that I've got my excessive seminar out of the way, were there any questions?
Alex, there is a question from the attendees. So Sheena would like to know whether it's possible to click on actionable insights for a drill down on each item that needs attention.
Yes. So if I click out of that and go back into the reports, if I go back into the recruiter dashboard and then click when the data loads, if I click into the metric, it will show the same display options as if it was on one view. So then you can look and go, okay, these are the live jobs that have been added in the last 7 days. These are the ones that I should be paying attention to.
Thank you. Another question that we've got is about whether the client filtering works in the same way as the client sets in one view, or whether it works more like the slice and dice option.
So with those, you can, using the manage client sets and creating client sets, you can go in. So there is one that I enthusiastically created earlier. When you select them and load the data, it will work very much in the same way as the one view, in that it will filter everything out. It won't really, unless you click into things, it won't then split out by the clients within those. So at a glance, it would kind of amalgamate them all together.
Super, thank you. We also have questions from attendees who would like to know whether it's possible to share any of these dashboards with users outside of Bullhorn Analytics, such as external customers or leadership.
So with that factor, by default, the ability to share these is more internal based. What you can do is with certain reports, right? So you would need to kind of do so within, say, certain like elements of the report. So with interviews pending, you can export the data it would export that section of the result. You can't export the entire result because it would, as kind of mentioned, become a little bit of noise. Like if you are trying to look through an email and it's effectively working like a giant screenshot, it's a lot to try and look through. So we have isolated that to work on a tile by tile basis.
Brilliant, thank you. Something else is whether, apart from the options at the top, the option to filter by tags or to filter by clients, how would you filter by groups or different teams?
So that depends on if they are in the existing structure and the hierarchy set up. So for example, if you look through the one view and you expand things out, you can see, right, okay, within London, there is the energy team that is broken down between perm and contract. Dashboards would work exactly the same in that if I want to filter all of this information by Boston, you select at the top right what team it is that you are looking to have the information relevant for, click latest data, all of their information is about that team. Similar in the sense to how you filter by client. Were there any more questions at all?
Zelda, I highlighted a couple if you want to check out the ones to be answered live. I think we have a couple more, that'd be great.
No pressure.
No pressure to find them.
I mean, I've done the hard part. Just building suspense.
Is it possible to omit data from the aggregated numbers or graphs, i.e. we want to exclude certain clients or job types?
So within small data, yes. Within trends, it would likely be a case of perhaps reconfiguring a metric. But in terms of, say, these graphs here, within small data, one of the key differences that the small data has allowed with functionality is that with these graphs, you are able to filter the information. So if I expand this out and go within the table view, within filters on the right-hand side, you are able to then filter any and all of the information by, say, job type or interview date or whatever it is. Again, those are the options that you would have within Slice and Dice or within the columns when you were opening a metric up. So yes, it is possible to go through. I mean, I've probably picked the worst example while screen sharing, but yes, you can tick in and out to say, right, this is going to affect, I don't want to be looking at 2024 placements.
Great.
I reckon we've got time for one more.
Okay, I've got one final one then. Can you set up dashboards for your staff and share them across the internal enterprise or make them private?
Yes. So with dashboards, one of the key things to kind of look at is a combination of reports that you can then share, say, business-wide. So if I select and go company view, that will share it with everyone in the business. If I was looking to only share it with, I don't know, Boston contract and London contract, it would share it with those. One of the other functionalities that the team hierarchy view has is logged in user and logged in users group. Now, they work very subjectively based on whoever is opening the report. So if you create Recruiter dashboard and you select a logged in user and then share it out, unfortunately, I have apparently done nothing. If you share that out business-wide, whoever opens it, the information is only relevant for them. So if you were to then instead use logged in users group and you want to share that out with the individual team leads, whoever opens it, it's about their team rather than statically having to build reports for this one is for London, this one is for Boston. You can make it a little broader in the sense that you've set it up and you don't need to recreate it every single time. I'm hoping those are the answers that you guys were looking for with your questions. Beyond my lovely questions slide, there are two QR codes here. One is a link to a winning new business guide. So this is Bullhorn wide literature rather than analytics specifically, with research that we've done to try and find what the best means of using technology to leverage to win to new business. So that's available if you guys want to quickly get a picture of that. Same as beside it, there is a QR code to book in a demo. So if you are a business that has joined that has potentially not got Analytics Enterprise Edition at the moment, if you scan that QR code, you're able to book in a demo to have it sort of taken through a little bit more in depth and a little broader than just the dashboards module. Beyond that, we have e-learning content. So if you are an existing Bullhorn customer, you can get onto the Bullhorn Learning Hub. There is all of the training literature in terms of videos on how to create dashboards. There's very basic things on there, such as how to enable them for your users. There's written literature and things like that. I'd imagine there will also be a copy to a recording of this webinar if you just enjoyed it so much the first time. Aside from that, guys, thank you for your time. Hope you all have lovely days.